Chapter 1. The invitation arrives on a Tuesday morning in May, 40 years after the fact. I recognize the elegant script immediately, though the hand that wrote it has been still for decades. The cream-colored card bears the golden palm frond logo of the Cannes Film Festival, and beneath it, in that familiar, flowing handwriting, "Some performances never end. The truth deserves its premiere. C.M." I set down my coffee and walked to my study. The Mediterranean morning light streams through the windows of my villa, casting long shadows across the collection of postcards that line my desk. Each one represents a case, a memory, a moment when truth emerged from deception. But this particular postcard, a vintage 1985 Cannes Film Festival promotional card, has been waiting for this moment. The image shows the Palais des Festivals at sunset, its steps crowded with elegant figures in evening wear. It looks like a scene from a film itself, all golden light and sophisticated glamour. But I know better. I know what happened on those very steps 40 years ago, during the most prestigious screening of that year's festival. I pick up the postcard and study it once more. The scene appears perfect, composed like a vintage Hollywood publicity shot. But if you know where to look, if you understand how to read the shadows and the spaces between the figures, you can see the truth hidden beneath the performance. The truth about Claude Moreau's death. The truth about the Cannes conspiracy. May 1985. I'm 30 years old when I first arrive in Cannes, a junior police officer from Monaco assigned to assist with security during the film festival. The assignment feels like a reward. 2 weeks on the Côte d'Azur, surrounded by movie stars and international glamour. I have no idea that I am about to encounter my first major case, the one that will define my approach to criminal investigation for the rest of my career. The festival is in full swing when I receive the call. A man has collapsed during a film screening at the Palais des Festivals. Initial reports suggest a heart attack, but the festival organizers want a police presence to manage the crowd and ensure there are no complications. I arrive at the Palais to find controlled chaos. The screening has been stopped, the audience evacuated, and paramedics are working frantically over a figure lying in the aisle of the main theater. But even from a distance, I can see that their efforts are futile. The man is clearly dead. Who is he? I ask the festival director, a nervous man in an expensive suit who keeps glancing toward the gathered crowd of journalists and photographers. "Claude Moreau," he replies, "one of France's most celebrated directors. This was the premiere of his latest film, The Artist's Truth. He was supposed to give a speech after the screening." I look around the theater, applying the method I learned from my mentor at the police academy, viewing the scene like a carefully composed photograph, looking for details that seem out of place or significant. The theater is elegant, with red velvet seats and crystal chandeliers. The screen still shows the frozen image from Moreau's film, a close-up of a woman's face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Where was he sitting? Third row, center, the seat of honor. I walk to the indicated seat and examine the area carefully. Moreau's personal effects are still there. A program from the screening, a pair of reading glasses, and a small notebook filled with handwritten notes. But something catches my attention. A faint, bitter smell that seems out of place in the elegant theater. Has anyone else noticed an unusual odor? I ask the paramedic who is now covering Moreau's body. He pauses and sniffs the air. Now that you mention it, yes, almonds maybe, very faint. The smell of bitter almonds is often associated with cyanide poisoning, though not everyone can detect it. I make a mental note to request a full toxicology examination, despite the apparent naturalness of Moreau's death. I'll need to speak with anyone who was sitting near Monsieur Moreau, I tell the festival director. And I'll need a complete list of everyone who had access to the theater before the screening. Is that really necessary? Claude had a weak heart. Everyone knew that. The stress of the premiere, the excitement. Perhaps, but until we're certain, this is a potential crime scene. The festival director's expression becomes even more anxious. Inspector, you must understand, this is the most important night of the festival. We have international press, distributors, celebrities. Any suggestion of foul play would be catastrophic for our reputation. I understand his concern, but I also understand something more important. The scene before me has the composed quality of a vintage postcard, everything perfectly arranged and dramatically lit. In my experience, when reality resembles art too closely, it's usually because someone has been directing the scene. Chapter 2. The Cast of Suspects. The next morning, I begin my investigation in earnest. The preliminary autopsy results confirm my suspicions. Claude Moreau died of cyanide poisoning, administered sometime in the hour before his death. What appeared to be a natural death during a moment of artistic triumph was, in fact, carefully planned murder. I set up a temporary office in the Carlton Hotel, the festival's unofficial headquarters, where most of the industry elite are staying. The hotel's elegant lobby provides the perfect setting for discreet interviews, sophisticated enough to put my subjects at ease, but public enough to prevent any sense of formal interrogation. My first interview is with Isabelle Laurent, Moreau's wife and frequent leading lady. She sits across from me in the hotel's salon, dressed in black silk and wearing dark glasses, despite the indoor setting. Even in grief, she maintains the poise and elegance that made her one of France's most celebrated actresses. Claude had been worried about something, she tells me, her voice carefully controlled. For the past few weeks, he seemed distracted, anxious. He was receiving letters that upset him, though he wouldn't tell me what they contained. What kind of letters? Personal correspondence, not business. They came to our home in Paris, always in the same type of envelope, cream-colored, expensive paper. Claude would read them and then lock them away in his study. When I asked about them, he said they were from someone in his past, someone he had hoped never to hear from again. Did you ever see who sent them? No signature that I could see, but the handwriting was distinctive, very elegant, very precise, like someone who had been educated in the old style, with careful attention to penmanship. I make notes about the mysterious letters, adding them to the growing list of elements that don't fit the simple narrative of a natural death. How did Claude seem last night before the screening? Nervous, but that was normal for a premiere. He always worried about how his work would be received. But there was something else, a kind of resignation, as if he was preparing for something unpleasant to happen. Did he mention feeling ill? No, nothing like that. If anything, he seemed determined to go through with the evening despite his concerns. He said this film was the most important work of his career, and he wanted to see it properly presented. After Isabel leaves, I review my notes and consider the implications. The mysterious letters suggest that Moreau's death might be connected to events from his past, possibly something that occurred years or even decades ago. In my experience, the most dangerous enemies are often those with the longest memories. My next interview is with Marcus Webb, an American producer who had been working with Moreau on international distribution of his films. Webb is a large, energetic man in his 50s, with the kind of aggressive confidence that characterizes successful Hollywood executives. Claude was a genius, he tells me, but he could be incredibly difficult to work with. He had very specific ideas about how his films should be presented, and he didn't like to compromise. What kind of difficulties? Creative control, mostly. Claude wanted approval over everything: the marketing campaign, the theatrical release strategy, even the design of the promotional materials. That's not how the business works, especially when you're dealing with international markets. Did these disagreements ever become serious? Webb hesitates, then seems to decide on honesty. 3 weeks ago, Claude threatened to withdraw his film from the festival. He claimed we were trying to compromise his artistic vision. This is significant new information. What prompted this threat? We had suggested some minor edits to make the film more commercially viable. Nothing major, just trimming a few scenes that might be considered too controversial for certain markets. Claude reacted as if we were asking him to destroy his life's work. How was this conflict resolved? It wasn't. Not really. Claude agreed to proceed with the festival screening, but he made it clear that he considered our partnership terminated. He was planning to buy back the rights to all his films. How much money was involved? Millions of dollars. Claude's films are valuable properties, especially in the European market. If he had withdrawn from our distribution deals, it would have been a significant financial loss for my company. After Webb leaves, I add financial motive to my growing list of potential reasons for Moreau's murder. But something about Webb's manner suggests there's more to the story than simple business disputes. My third interview is with Elena Rossi, an Italian actress who had worked with Moreau on several films over the past decade. She's a striking woman in her 40s, with the kind of sophisticated beauty that ages gracefully. But I notice a nervousness in her manner that seems out of character for someone accustomed to public attention. Claude was like a father to me, she says, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. He gave me my first important role when I was just starting my career. I owe everything to him. How did he seem to you recently? Troubled? He had been receiving some kind of correspondence that upset him greatly. He mentioned that someone from his past was trying to contact him, someone he had hoped never to see again. This confirms what Isabel had told me about the mysterious letters. Did he give you any details about this person? Only that it was connected to his early work, to films he made in the late 1960s. Claude said that some of his early movies had made him enemies, people who had never forgiven him for certain truths he had revealed. What kind of truths? Claude was known for making films that exposed corruption, that challenged powerful people. In the late 60s, that was dangerous work. There were people who wanted to silence him. And you think this might be connected to his death? Elena looks around nervously, as if afraid of being overheard. I think Claude knew he was in danger. Last week he asked me if I had noticed anyone following him, anyone who seemed to be watching him. He said he felt like he was being hunted. My final interview of the day is with Viktor Petrov, a Russian film critic who had been championing Moreau's work in Eastern Europe. Petrov is a small, intense man with wire-rimmed glasses and the careful manner of someone accustomed to choosing his words precisely. Claude Moreau was one of the few Western directors who understood the power of cinema to reveal truth. He tells me in accented but precise English. His films were not mere entertainment. They were investigations into the human condition. Did you know him well personally? We had corresponded for several years, and we met whenever he visited film festivals in Eastern Europe. Claude was fascinated by the political dimensions of filmmaking, by the way movies could expose secrets that powerful people preferred to keep hidden. Did he ever mention feeling threatened because of his work? Petrov considers this question carefully. Claude believed that there were people in the film industry who wanted to silence him, not through direct censorship, but through more subtle means: financial pressure, distribution problems, negative reviews that seemed coordinated rather than genuine. Did he mention any specific individuals? There was a man named Philippe Beaumont, a powerful figure in European film distribution. Claude believed that Beaumont had been working against him for years, trying to limit the reach of his more controversial films. The name Philippe Beaumont strikes me as familiar, though I can't immediately place where I've heard it. I make a note to investigate this connection further. What was the nature of their conflict? It went back many years to the early 1970s. Claude claimed that Beaumont had stolen several of his film projects and produced them under other directors' names. But it was more than just business. Claude said it was personal, that Beaumont had never forgiven him for something that happened during their early partnership. As the day ends, I review my notes and consider the emerging pattern. Claude Moreau appears to have had multiple enemies, each with different motives for wanting him dead. There's the financial conflict with Marcus Webb, the mysterious letters from someone in his past, and the long-standing feud with Philippe Beaumont. But there's something else, something that connects all these elements, the sense that Moreau's death was not just murder, but the culmination of a carefully planned campaign of revenge. Someone had been patient, methodical, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Cannes Film Festival provided that moment, a public stage where Moreau's death would have maximum impact, where his killer could watch the aftermath of their revenge unfold in front of an international audience. As I prepare to leave the Carlton Hotel, I take one last look at the elegant lobby where I conducted my interviews. The scene has the composed quality of a vintage postcard. Sophisticated figures in an opulent setting, everything perfectly arranged and dramatically lit. But I now understand that beneath this beautiful surface lies a web of jealousy, greed, and long-suppressed hatred. Tomorrow I will begin the process of untangling that web. Tonight I will study the postcard image of the Palais des Festivals and try to understand what secrets it might reveal about the person who turned Claude Moreau's greatest triumph into his final performance. The investigation has only just begun, but already I can sense that this case will challenge everything I think I know about human nature and the price of artistic truth. In the glamorous world of international cinema, it seems, even the most beautiful performances can hide the darkest realities. Chapter 3. Behind the Scenes. The next morning brings the kind of crystalline Mediterranean light that makes the Côte d'Azur famous. I stand on the terrace of the Carlton Hotel, watching the festival machinery continue its relentless operation despite the tragedy of the previous evening. The red carpet is being rolled out again, photographers are setting up their equipment, and the glamorous facade of Cannes reasserts itself with remarkable efficiency. But beneath the surface, I sense the undercurrents of fear and speculation that Claude Moreau's death has created. In a community built on image and reputation, murder is the ultimate disruption of carefully maintained appearances. Inspector Dubois joins me on the terrace, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a manila folder, thick with preliminary reports. "The toxicology results confirm cyanide," he says, handing me a cup. "Specifically, potassium cyanide dissolved in liquid. The concentration was extremely high. Death would have occurred within minutes of ingestion. Any indication of how it was administered? That's where it becomes interesting. The champagne glass from the reception tested negative. So did everything else he consumed that evening, according to our analysis. I consider this information carefully, which means the poison was administered sometime between the reception and his collapse in the theater." "Exactly. But here's the problem. According to multiple witnesses, Moreau went directly from the reception to his seat in the theater. He didn't eat or drink anything during that time." "What about before the reception?" "We've traced his movements throughout the day. Lunch at the Carlton with his wife, confirmed by restaurant staff. A brief meeting with his producer at 3 o'clock. Then he returned to his hotel room to prepare for the evening. The hotel staff confirms no room service was ordered. No visitors were admitted." I walk to the terrace railing and look down at the Croisette, where early morning joggers are already sharing the sidewalk, with festival workers setting up for another day of screenings and parties. The scene has the composed quality of a vintage postcard. Elegant figures against a backdrop of palm trees and Mediterranean architecture. But like all postcards, it shows only the surface of reality. "We need to examine the timeline more carefully," I tell Dubois, "and we need to understand the relationships between our suspects. In my experience, murder in a closed community like this is rarely about a single motive. It's usually the culmination of multiple tensions and conflicts. I've arranged for us to interview the key suspects again this morning, starting with Marcus Webb, the American producer. We meet Webb in the business center of the Carlton Hotel, a space designed for the kind of high-stakes negotiations that drive the film industry. Webb sits behind a polished conference table, surrounded by contracts, financial documents, and the tools of his trade. He's dressed in an expensive suit, but I notice the slight tremor in his hands as he reaches for his coffee cup. "This whole situation is a nightmare," he begins before we've even asked a question. Claude's death is tragic, of course, but the business implications are staggering. We have distribution deals pending, international sales agreements, marketing campaigns already in motion. "Tell us about your relationship with Monsieur Moreau," I say. "You mentioned yesterday that he could be difficult." Webb's expression becomes guarded. Claude was an artist. Artists have strong opinions about their work. Sometimes those opinions conflict with commercial realities. What kind of conflicts? Creative control, mostly. Claude wanted final cut approval on everything. Editing, marketing, even the poster design. That's not how the business works, especially when you're dealing with international distribution. Did these conflicts become serious? Webb hesitates, then seems to make a decision. 3 weeks ago, Claude threatened to withdraw the film from the festival. He claimed we were trying to compromise his artistic vision. This is new information and potentially significant. What prompted this threat? We had suggested some minor edits to make the film more commercially viable. Nothing major, just trimming a few scenes that might be considered too controversial for certain markets. And how did you resolve this conflict? We didn't. Not really. Claude agreed to proceed with the festival screening, but he made it clear that he considered our relationship terminated after Cannes. He was planning to buy back the rights to the film. I exchange glances with Inspector Dubois. A financial dispute of this magnitude could certainly provide motive for murder, especially if Webb stood to lose a significant investment. "How much money was at stake?" Dubois asks. The production budget was $12 million. With marketing and distribution costs, we're looking at a total investment of nearly $20 million. If Claude had withdrawn the film or bought back the rights, it would have been a catastrophic loss. Did you discuss this situation with anyone else? My business partners, of course, and our legal team. We were exploring our options. What kind of options? Webb's discomfort is obvious now. Legal remedies, injunctions to prevent him from withdrawing the film, that sort of thing. After Webb leaves, Dubois and I review our notes. The financial motive is clear and substantial, but something about Webb's manner suggests there's more to the story. "He's hiding something," Dubois observes. "Yes. But what? And is it related to the murder, or simply embarrassing business practices?" Our next interview is with Elena Rossi, the Italian actress. We meet her in the hotel's elegant salon, a space decorated with period furniture and oil paintings that create an atmosphere of old-world sophistication. Elena appears more composed than she had the previous evening, though I notice she's wearing dark glasses despite the indoor setting. "I've been thinking about what you asked yesterday," she begins, "about Claude seeming worried. I remember now, it wasn't just the letters. He mentioned something about his past catching up with him." His past? Claude made his first films in the late 1960s, during a very turbulent time in French cinema. There were political movements, protests, films that challenged the establishment. He once told me that some of his early work had made him enemies. What kind of enemies? He never specified, but he said there were people who had never forgiven him for certain films he made, certain truths he revealed. This adds another dimension to the case. Political motives for murder are not uncommon, especially when they involve long-held grudges and ideological conflicts. Did he mention any specific films or incidents? There was one film, The Collaborator's Daughter, that he made in 1968. It was about the French resistance and the people who betrayed them to the Nazis. Claude said it was based on real events, real people. Some of those people were still alive when the film was released. How did they react? There were threats, lawsuits, attempts to have the film banned. Claude received death threats for months after its release. Eventually, the controversy died down, but he said some people never forgot. And you think this might be connected to his recent concerns. Elena removes her dark glasses, revealing eyes that are red from crying. 2 weeks ago, Claude received a package at his hotel. Inside was a photograph from the set of The Collaborator's Daughter, a picture of him directing a particular scene. On the back, someone had written, "Some debts are never forgiven." This is exactly the kind of detail that can break a case open. Do you know what happened to this photograph? Claude kept it. He said it was evidence that someone was trying to intimidate him. He planned to turn it over to the police after the festival. Where would he have kept it? In his hotel room, I assume. He had a small safe where he kept important documents. Inspector Dubois makes a note to search Moreau's hotel room more thoroughly. If the photograph still exists, it could provide crucial evidence about the killer's identity. Our final interview of the morning is with Viktor Petrov, the Russian film critic. We meet him in the hotel's library, a quiet space lined with leather-bound books and furnished with comfortable reading chairs. Petrov sits with perfect posture, his hands folded in his lap, his expression thoughtful and serious. "I have been considering our conversation last night," he says in his careful English. "There are things about Claude's situation that I did not mention, things that seem too speculative to share with the police. We're interested in any information you can provide," I tell him. Claude believed that someone was systematically destroying his reputation, not through direct attacks, but through subtle undermining of his work and his credibility. In what way? Negative reviews that seemed coordinated, distribution problems that appeared to be deliberate, financing difficulties that arose without clear explanation. Claude was convinced that someone with significant influence in the industry was working against him. Did he have any idea who this person might be? Petrov hesitates, then speaks carefully. There was a man named Philippe Beaumont, a powerful figure in European film distribution. Claude believed that Beaumont had been systematically sabotaging his career for years. The name strikes me immediately. Philippe Beaumont was the victim in my first major case, the Monte Carlo casino owner who died under mysterious circumstances. The connection seems too significant to be coincidental. What was the nature of the conflict between Moreau and Beaumont? It went back many years, to the early 1970s. They'd been partners in a production company, but the partnership ended badly. Claude claimed that Beaumont had stolen several of his film projects and produced them under other directors' names. And you believe this conflict continued until recently? Claude was convinced that Beaumont was still working against him, even though their direct business relationship had ended decades ago. He said that Beaumont had a long memory and an even longer reach in the industry. After Petrov leaves, I sit quietly in the library, processing this new information. The connection to Philippe Beaumont adds a layer of complexity that I hadn't anticipated. If Moreau's murder is connected to old grievances and industry politics, the list of potential suspects could be much larger than we initially thought. "What do you think?" Dubois asks. "I think we're dealing with something more complex than a simple business dispute or crime of passion. This feels like the culmination of conflicts that have been building for years, possibly decades. We need to search Moreau's hotel room for that photograph Elena mentioned. And we need to investigate the connection to Philippe Beaumont more thoroughly. If there's a pattern of revenge killings targeting people in the film industry, we may be dealing with a serial killer." Chapter 4. The Photograph. Moreau's suite at the Carlton Hotel occupies a corner of the 4th floor, with windows overlooking both the Mediterranean and the bustling Croisette below. The room has been sealed since the previous evening, but now we have permission to conduct a thorough search. The suite reflects Moreau's status as a successful director. Elegant furnishings, expensive artwork, and the kind of attention to detail that speaks of refined taste. But as I examine the space, I'm struck by how impersonal it feels. Unlike a lived-in home, this is clearly a temporary residence, a stage set for the duration of the festival. Inspector Dubois heads directly to the safe that Elena mentioned, a small but sophisticated unit built into the bedroom closet. It's locked, of course. We'll need to bring in a specialist to open it. While we wait for the locksmith, I examine the rest of the suite using my postcard method, viewing each room as a carefully composed scene, and looking for details that seem out of place or significant. In the living area, I notice that the furniture has been arranged with particular care. The chairs are positioned to create intimate conversation areas. The lighting is soft and flattering, and fresh flowers have been placed strategically around the room. It's the kind of setup you might expect for important meetings or interviews. Moreau was expecting visitors, I tell Dubois. This room has been prepared for entertaining. The hotel staff mentioned that he had requested extra champagne and canapes to be delivered yesterday afternoon. They assumed it was for a pre-screening reception. But according to our timeline, he attended the official reception at the Palais. Why would he need refreshments in his room as well? We continue our examination, and in the bedroom, I find something interesting. On the nightstand beside the bed is a leather-bound notebook, open to a page covered with Moreau's handwriting. The entries appear to be notes for a film project, but as I read more carefully, I realize there's something else entirely. "Dubois, look at this." The notebook contains what appears to be a detailed investigation into Philippe Beaumont's business practices. There are names, dates, financial figures, and allegations of fraud, bribery, and other criminal activities. It reads like the notes of a journalist or investigator building a case against a powerful figure. Moreau was investigating Beaumont, Dubois observes. This looks like evidence gathering for a potential exposé, or for a film based on real events. Remember, Moreau was known for making movies that revealed uncomfortable truths about powerful people. The locksmith arrives and makes quick work of the safe, Inside, we find exactly what Elena had described. A black and white photograph showing Moreau directing a scene from The Collaborator's Daughter. The image is clearly from the late 1960s, showing a much younger Moreau working with actors in period costume. On the back of the photograph, in block letters written with a red pen, is the message Eleanor had mentioned. Some debts are never forgiven. But there's more in the safe. We find a manila envelope containing additional photographs, documents, and what appears to be a detailed dossier on several individuals. As I examine the contents, a disturbing pattern emerges. These are all people connected to The Collaborator's Daughter, I tell Dubois. Cast members, crew, financial backers, and look at this. I show him a list written in Moreau's handwriting. It contains 8 names, and 3 of them have been crossed out in red ink. Beside each crossed-out name is a date and a brief notation. Heart attack, 1978. Car accident, 1981. Suicide, 1983. Someone has been systematically eliminating people connected to that film, Dubois says quietly. And if this pattern is correct, Moreau was the 4th victim, which means there are 4 more potential targets still alive. We examine the remaining names on the list. 2 of them I don't recognize, but the 3rd name stops me cold. Isabelle Laurent, Moreau's wife. We need to find Madame Laurent immediately, I tell Dubois. If this pattern holds, she could be in serious danger. We try calling her room, but there's no answer. The hotel staff confirms that she checked out early this morning, leaving no forwarding address. Her departure seems sudden and unplanned. She left behind several personal items and didn't settle her bill. Either she's fleeing because she's in danger, Dubois says, or she's fleeing because she's guilty. There's a 3rd possibility, I point out. She could be fleeing because she knows who the killer is, and she's afraid of being the next victim. We return to the photographs and documents from the safe, looking for clues about the killer's identity. Among the papers, I find a letter dated just 1 week ago. It's written on expensive stationery with no letterhead, and the handwriting is elegant and precise. Monsieur Moreau, your recent inquiries into certain historical matters have not gone unnoticed. Some secrets are best left buried, and some debts are best left unpaid. I strongly advise you to abandon your current project and focus on your legitimate filmmaking activities. A concerned friend. The letter is unsigned, but there's something familiar about the handwriting. I've seen this precise, elegant script before, though I can't immediately place where. This was sent as a warning, I tell Dubois. The killer gave Moreau a chance to back down from whatever investigation he was conducting. But Moreau didn't back down. No, and that decision cost him his life. We spend the rest of the afternoon analyzing the evidence from Moreau's safe and trying to trace Isabelle Laurent's whereabouts. The hotel's security cameras show her leaving through a side entrance at approximately 6 o'clock this morning, carrying a single suitcase and moving with obvious urgency. By evening, we've established that she took a taxi to the Nice airport, but after that, the trail goes cold. She could have taken a flight to anywhere in Europe, or she could have rented a car and driven to any number of destinations. We need to approach this systematically, I tell Dubois as we review our findings. We have a killer who has been operating for at least 15 years, systematically eliminating people connected to a specific film. The murders have been made to look like accidents or natural deaths, which suggests it's someone with considerable sophistication and patience. And now they've escalated to a more direct method, which suggests either desperation or a change in circumstances. Something about Moreau's investigation threatened the killer in a way that the previous victims hadn't. What about the connection to Philippe Beaumont? That's still unclear. Beaumont died 4 years ago, so he can't be our killer. But his death might be connected to this pattern. We need to examine the circumstances of his death more carefully. As night falls over Cannes, I stand once again on the terrace of the Carlton Hotel, looking out at the lights of the festival. The glamorous facade continues, but I now understand that beneath the surface lies a web of old grievances, buried secrets, and carefully planned revenge. The killer has been patient, methodical, and extremely careful. But by escalating to a public murder at the festival's most prestigious event, they've made a crucial mistake. They've drawn attention to a pattern that might otherwise have remained hidden for years. The question now is whether we can identify and stop them before they claim their next victim, and whether Isabelle Laurent is running from the killer or running because she is the killer. Chapter 5, The Final Screening. The breakthrough comes at dawn, when Inspector Dubois receives a call from the Nice police. Isabelle Laurent has been found, not fleeing the country as we had assumed, but dead in a hotel room near the airport. The circumstances are immediately suspicious. She appears to have been poisoned, and her room shows signs of having been searched. I arrive at the scene as the sun rises over the Mediterranean, casting long shadows across the modest hotel where Isabelle spent her final hours. The contrast with the luxury of the Carlton could not be more stark. This is a place where people come to disappear, not to be found. The hotel room tells a story of desperation and fear. Isabelle's suitcase has been hastily packed, with clothes thrown in without care. On the nightstand, we find a letter she was writing, unfinished but revealing. My darling Claude, if you are reading this, then I have failed to protect you as I promised I would. The truth about the collaborator's daughter was more dangerous than either of us realized. I should have told you about the letters, about the threats that never stopped coming. I thought I could handle it alone, but I was wrong. The person responsible for the deaths, for your death, is someone we trusted, someone who has been part of our lives for years, waiting for the right moment to complete their revenge. I have evidence, but I fear it may be too late to... The letter ends there, the pen fallen from her hand. But beside it, we find something that changes everything. A small tape recorder and a cassette labeled Insurance, Play If Anything Happens to Me. Back at the Carlton Hotel, we listen to the recording in Inspector Dubois' temporary office. Isabelle's voice is clear and determined, though we can hear the fear beneath her composed words. This is Isabelle Laurent, and I am recording this on May 15th, 1985, because I believe my life is in danger. For 17 years, I have kept a secret about the making of The Collaborator's Daughter. I was not just an actress in that film. I was Claude's research assistant, and I helped him identify the real people whose stories the film was based on. One of those people was a woman named Henri Dubois, who had collaborated with the Nazis during the occupation. She provided information that led to the arrest and execution of several resistance members, including a young man named Jean-Luc Moreau. No relation to Claude, despite the shared surname. Henri Dubois had a daughter, Catherine, who was 12 years old when the film was released. The film portrayed her mother as a traitor and a coward, which was accurate but devastating for a child to endure. Catherine's life was destroyed by the revelation. She was ostracized, bullied, forced to change her name and move away from everything she had known. I learned recently that Catherine Dubois became Catherine Moreau when she married, taking the name of the very family her mother had betrayed. She spent years planning her revenge against everyone involved in the film that destroyed her childhood. She has been systematically killing the cast and crew, making their deaths appear accidental. But Catherine made one crucial mistake. She fell in love with Claude during the making of a later film, and she married him. For years, she lived with the man whose work had ruined her life, waiting for the right moment to complete her revenge. The Cannes Festival provided that opportunity, a public stage for Claude's final humiliation and death. I have evidence of Catherine's real identity hidden in... The recording cuts off abruptly, but we have heard enough. The killer is not some external enemy seeking revenge. It is Claude Moreau's own wife, Catherine, the woman we have been searching for as a potential victim. She's been living under a false identity for years, Dubois says quietly, married to the man whose film destroyed her life, planning the perfect revenge. And now she's completed it, I add. But she made a mistake by killing Isabel. That was emotional, not calculated. It suggests she's losing control. Where would she go now? I consider this carefully, applying my postcard method to the psychological landscape of the case. Catherine has spent 17 years planning this revenge, living a lie, suppressing her true feelings. Now that her plan is complete, what would she do? She'll want to see the final act, I tell Dubois. This isn't just about killing Claude. It's about destroying his legacy, his reputation, his work. She'll want to witness the aftermath, to see how the film industry reacts to his death. You think she's still in Cannes? I think she never left. She's been here all along, watching, waiting to see the results of her work. We return to the festival, but now we're looking at it with different eyes. Catherine Moreau could be anyone. A journalist, a festival worker, a film industry professional. She has had years to establish her false identity and integrate herself into the community. But there's one place she's most likely to be. The memorial screening of Claude's film that has been hastily organized for this evening. It's exactly the kind of event where she could observe the impact of her revenge while hiding in plain sight. The screening is held at the Palais des Festivals, in the same theater where Claude died. The irony is not lost on anyone present. The film industry has rallied around Claude's memory, turning his death into a celebration of his artistic legacy. Exactly the opposite of what Catherine intended. As the lights dim and the film begins, I scan the audience carefully. Catherine could be any of the women present, the journalist in the third row, the festival programmer near the back, the film distributor sitting alone in the balcony. But then, I see her, and I know immediately that it's Catherine. She's sitting in the exact seat where Claude died, wearing a black dress and a small, satisfied smile. She has positioned herself to watch not just the film, but the audience's reaction to it, to see how they honor the man she murdered. The recognition comes from a detail I noticed in Isabel's hotel room, but didn't fully process at the time. A small scar on the woman's left hand, visible when she applauds during the film's opening credits. It's the same scar I saw in one of the photographs from Claude's safe, a picture of the cast and crew of The Collaborator's Daughter, including a young girl visiting the set. Catherine Dubois, age 12, with a distinctive scar from a childhood accident. I signaled to Inspector Dubois, who has positioned himself near the theater's exits. We move carefully, not wanting to create a disturbance during the memorial screening. But as we approach Catherine's seat, she turns and looks directly at me. "You're too late," she says quietly, her voice barely audible over the film's soundtrack. "It's already finished." "Catherine Dubois," I say, using her real name, "you're under arrest for the murders of Claude Moreau and Isabelle Laurent." She doesn't resist as Dubois places the handcuffs on her wrists. Instead, she continues watching the screen, where her late husband's masterpiece plays to a rapt audience. "Do you know what it's like," she asks, "to live with a lie for 17 years? To love someone who destroyed your life without even knowing it?" Claude never recognized me. He never connected the little girl from the set visits to the woman he married. He was too focused on his art to see the real person standing beside him. "Why did you wait so long?" "Because I wanted him to achieve everything he dreamed of first. I wanted him to reach the pinnacle of his career, to have everything he valued most, his reputation, his legacy, his art. And then I wanted to take it all away. But the industry has turned him into a martyr instead. Even in death, he wins." As we escort Catherine from the theater, the film continues playing behind us. The audience remains unaware that they have just witnessed the arrest of the woman who orchestrated the very tragedy they are commemorating. Chapter 6. The Final Cut. 3 days later, I sit in the same cafe where this case began, watching the final day of the Cannes Film Festival unfold around me. The red carpets are being rolled up, the photographers are packing their equipment, and the glamorous facade is being carefully dismantled until next year. Catherine Moreau, or Catherine Dubois, as she will be known in the court records, has confessed to everything. The 17-year plan, the systematic murders disguised as accidents, the patient cultivation of her false identity as Claude's loving wife. She has provided details about each of the previous victims, confirming our theory about the pattern of revenge killings. The case has sent shockwaves through the film industry, not just because of the murders, but because of what they reveal about the power of art to destroy lives. The Collaborator's Daughter was hailed as a masterpiece of political cinema, but its impact on a 12-year-old girl was never considered by its creators. Inspector Dubois joins me at the cafe, carrying a folder of final reports and a bottle of champagne. "The prosecutor is confident of a conviction," he tells me. "Catherine's confession is detailed and corroborated by the physical evidence. She'll spend the rest of her life in prison." "And the other victims?" the ones from the earlier accidents. Those cases will be reopened and reclassified as homicides. The families deserve to know the truth, even after all these years. We sit in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the festival workers dismantle the last of the promotional displays. The transformation is remarkable. Within hours, Cannes will return to being a quiet Mediterranean resort town, with no trace of the glamour and drama that defined it for the past 2 weeks. "There's something I don't understand," Dubois says finally. "Why did Catherine kill Isabel? That wasn't part of her original plan." "Because Isabel figured out who she really was," I explain. Isabel had been researching the film's history for a documentary project, and she discovered the connection between Catherine Dubois and Catherine Moreau. She confronted Catherine, probably hoping to help her find some kind of peace or closure. Instead, she signed her own death warrant. So Isabel was trying to save her. In a way, yes, but Catherine was too far gone, too committed to her revenge to accept any kind of redemption. She had spent 17 years becoming someone else, and she couldn't find her way back to who she really was. Dubois opens the champagne and pours 2 glasses. "To Claude Moreau," he says, "and to the truth, however painful it might be." We drink, and I reflect on the strange nature of this case. In most murders, the killer and victim are separated by hatred or greed or passion. But Catherine and Claude were bound together by love and art and shared dreams, and by a secret that neither of them fully understood until it was too late. "What will you do now?" Dubois asks. "Return to my villa, I suppose. Write up my notes, add this case to my collection." I gesture toward the postcard in my jacket pocket. A vintage 1985 Cannes Film Festival promotional card that I purchased from a vendor on the Croisette. Every case deserves its own postcard. And if another case comes along? I consider this question carefully. At 70, I had thought my detective days were behind me, but the past week has reminded me that there's still satisfaction in uncovering the truth, in bringing justice to those who have been wronged. "We'll see," I tell him. "The world is full of mysteries, and some of them still need solving." As evening falls over Cannes, I walk one final time along the Croisette. The festival is over, but the Mediterranean remains eternal, the same sea that has witnessed centuries of human drama, triumph, and tragedy. Tomorrow the film industry will move on to other festivals, other premieres, other stories. But the truth about Claude Moreau and Catherine Dubois will remain, preserved in court records and police files, and in the memories of those who knew them. I pause at the steps of the Palais des Festivals, where just a week ago, Claude Moreau walked confidently toward what he thought would be his greatest triumph. The building is dark now, empty of the crowds and cameras that gave it life during the festival. But I can still see the scene as it was, the elegant figures in evening wear, the photographers capturing every moment, the sense of anticipation and celebration. It's a perfect postcard image, frozen in time. But like all postcards, it shows only the surface of reality. Beneath the glamour and sophistication lay decades of pain, carefully planned revenge, and the tragic consequences of art that cuts too close to the truth. I take out the festival postcard and examine it one more time. On the front is the familiar image of the Palais des Festivals at sunset, with elegant figures ascending the red-carpeted steps. It looks exactly like the scene I witnessed a week ago, all golden light and sophisticated glamour. But now I know what the postcard doesn't show. The 12-year-old girl whose life was destroyed by a film. The woman who spent 17 years planning her revenge, and the man who died never knowing that his greatest love was also his greatest enemy. I turn the postcard over and write a brief note on the back. Cannes, 1985. The truth is always more complex than the image suggests. HD. Then I slip it into my jacket pocket, next to all the others. Another case, another memory, another reminder that in the world of human relationships, nothing is ever quite what it seems. As I walk back toward my hotel, I notice a young woman sitting alone at a cafe, writing in a notebook. She looks up as I pass, and for a moment, our eyes meet. There's something in her expression, a mixture of determination and sadness, that reminds me of Catherine Dubois at 12 years old. I wonder what story she's writing, what truths she's trying to uncover, what secrets she's carrying. In a few years, will she be the subject of another investigation, another mystery that needs solving? The thought follows me back to my hotel, where I pack my belongings and prepare to return to my quiet villa overlooking the Mediterranean. The Cannes Film Festival is over, but somewhere in the world, another story is beginning, another postcard waiting to be written. Chapter 6. The Final Cut. 3 days later, I sit in the same cafe where this case began, watching the final day of the Cannes Film Festival unfold around me. The red carpets are being rolled up, the photographers are packing their equipment, and the glamorous facade is being carefully dismantled until next year. Catherine Moreau, or Catherine Dubois, as she will be known in the court records, has confessed to everything. The 17-year plan, the systematic murders disguised as accidents, the patient cultivation of her false identity as Claude's loving wife. She has provided details about each of the previous victims, confirming our theory about the pattern of revenge killings. The case has sent shockwaves through the film industry, not just because of the murders, but because of what they reveal about the power of art to destroy lives. The Collaborator's Daughter was hailed as a masterpiece of political cinema, but its impact on a 12-year-old girl was never considered by its creators. Inspector Dubois joins me at the cafe, carrying a folder of final reports and a bottle of champagne. The prosecutor is confident of a conviction, he tells me. Catherine's confession is detailed and corroborated by the physical evidence. She'll spend the rest of her life in prison. And the other victims, the ones from the earlier accidents, those cases will be reopened and reclassified as homicides. The families deserve to know the truth, even after all these years. We sit in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the festival workers dismantle the last of the promotional displays. The transformation is remarkable. Within hours, Cannes will return to being a quiet Mediterranean resort town, with no trace of the glamour and drama that defined it for the past 2 weeks. There's something I don't understand, Dubois says finally. Why did Catherine kill Isabel? That wasn't part of her original plan. Because Isabel figured out who she really was, I explain. Isabel had been researching the film's history for a documentary project, and she discovered the connection between Catherine Dubois and Catherine Moreau. She confronted Catherine, probably hoping to help her find some kind of peace or closure. Instead, she signed her own death warrant. So Isabel was trying to save her. In a way, yes. But Catherine was too far gone, too committed to her revenge to accept any kind of redemption. She had spent 17 years becoming someone else, and she couldn't find her way back to who she really was. Dubois opens the champagne and pours 2 glasses. To Claude Moreau, he says, and to the truth, however painful it might be. We drink, and I reflect on the strange nature of this case. In most murders, the killer and victim are separated by hatred or greed or passion. But Catherine and Claude were bound together by love and art and shared dreams, and by a secret that neither of them fully understood until it was too late. "What will you do now?" Dubois asks. "Return to my villa, I suppose. Write up my notes, add this case to my collection." I gesture toward the postcard in my jacket pocket. A vintage 1985 Cannes Film Festival promotional card that I purchased from a vendor on the Croisette. Every case deserves its own postcard. And if another case comes along, I consider this question carefully. At 70, I had thought my detective days were behind me, but the past week has reminded me that there's still satisfaction in uncovering the truth, in bringing justice to those who have been wronged. "We'll see," I tell him. "The world is full of mysteries, and some of them still need solving." As evening falls over Cannes, I walk one final time along the Croisette. The festival is over, but the Mediterranean remains eternal, the same sea that has witnessed centuries of human drama, triumph, and tragedy. Tomorrow the film industry will move on to other festivals, other premieres, other stories. But the truth about Claude Moreau and Catherine Dubois will remain, preserved in court records and police files, and in the memories of those who knew them. I pause at the steps of the Palais des Festivals, where just a week ago Claude Moreau walked confidently toward what he thought would be his greatest triumph. The building is dark now, empty of the crowds and cameras that gave it life during the festival. But I can still see the scene as it was, the elegant figures in evening wear, the photographers capturing every moment, the sense of anticipation and celebration. It's a perfect postcard image, frozen in time. But like all postcards, it shows only the surface of reality. Beneath the glamour and sophistication lay decades of pain, carefully planned revenge, and the tragic consequences of art that cuts too close to the truth. I take out the festival postcard and examine it one more time. On the front is the familiar image of the Palais des Festivals at sunset, with elegant figures ascending the red-carpeted steps. It looks exactly like the scene I witnessed a week ago, all golden light and sophisticated glamour. But now I know what the postcard doesn't show. The 12-year-old girl whose life was destroyed by a film. The woman who spent 17 years planning her revenge. And the man who died never knowing that his greatest love was also his greatest enemy. I turn the postcard over and write a brief note on the back. Cannes, 1985. The truth is always more complex than the image suggests. HD. Then I slip it into my jacket pocket, next to all the others. Another case, another memory, another reminder that in the world of human relationships, nothing is ever quite what it seems. As I walk back toward my hotel, I notice a young woman sitting alone at a cafe, writing in a notebook. She looks up as I pass, and for a moment, our eyes meet. There's something in her expression, a mixture of determination and sadness, that reminds me of Catherine Dubois at 12 years old. I wonder what story she's writing, what truths she's trying to uncover, what secrets she's carrying. In a few years, will she be the subject of another investigation, another mystery that needs solving? The thought follows me back to my hotel, where I pack my belongings and prepare to return to my quiet villa overlooking the Mediterranean. The Cannes Film Festival is over, but somewhere in the world, another story is beginning, another postcard waiting to be written. 6 months later, I receive a letter from Inspector Dubois. Catherine Moreau has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During her trial, she showed no remorse for the murders, but she did express regret for one thing: that Claude never lived to see his final film win the Palme d'Or at the following year's festival. The letter also contains a newspaper clipping about a new film in production, a biographical drama about the making of The Collaborator's Daughter and its tragic aftermath. The director is quoted as saying that the film will explore the unintended consequences of art and the price of truth in a complex world. I wonder if this new film will create its own victims, its own cycle of pain and revenge. Art has the power to illuminate truth, but it also has the power to destroy lives. The challenge for artists, and for all of us, is learning to wield that power responsibly. I add the newspaper clipping to my case file and place the entire folder in my study next to the others. Each case represents a moment when truth emerged from deception, when justice was served despite the complexity of human nature. But as I arrange the files, I notice something that makes me pause. There's a pattern in the cases I've solved, a connection between the Monte Carlo casino murder, the Villa Marguerite art forgery, and now the Cannes Film Festival killing. All three involved people from the sophisticated world of European culture and commerce. All three had roots in events from decades past, and all three were solved through careful attention to details that others had overlooked. More intriguingly, all three cases involved postcards, either as evidence or as part of my investigative method. It's as if someone has been watching my work, studying my techniques, perhaps even orchestrating events to draw me into these investigations. The thought is unsettling, but also intriguing. If there is someone out there manipulating events, creating mysteries for me to solve, then they understand something fundamental about my nature. I cannot resist a well-crafted puzzle, especially one that involves the intersection of art, culture, and human psychology. I walk to my desk and examine the 3 postcards from my recent cases: Monte Carlo's casino at night, Villa Marguerite's honey-colored stone in Mediterranean sunlight, and the Palais des Festivals during the golden hour of a Cannes evening. Each image is beautiful, sophisticated, carefully composed, and each one led me to a truth that someone had tried very hard to hide. If there is a pattern here, if someone is indeed orchestrating these events, then I suspect this is not the end of the story. Somewhere in Europe, another postcard is waiting to be sent. Another mystery is being carefully constructed. Another truth is being buried beneath layers of deception and sophistication. The thought should worry me, but instead I find it oddly comforting. At 70, I had thought my detective days were behind me. But if someone out there believes I still have mysteries to solve, then perhaps they're right. I return the postcards to their place of honor on my desk and pour myself a glass of wine. Outside my window, the Mediterranean stretches toward the horizon, eternal and mysterious. Somewhere beyond that horizon, another story is waiting to unfold. And when it does, I'll be ready.